So I was looking at my timeline and my YouTube shorts, and I came across a clip that I've seen on both platforms about a clip of an interview or a conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And it's titled A Conversation or a Dialogue. This particular clip out of that conversation that they had that was televised, that particular clip, Nikki Giovanni is addressing James Baldwin as a black woman in a loving relationship with a black man, asking that black man to lie to her in regards to being happy. And then the black man saying, if I'm not happy, I'm not going to lie to you because I love you. And Nikki Giovanni as a black woman saying, but I need you to lie to me. Of course you're going to lie to me if you love me. If you leave out of here with, such and such, another female, you're going to lie to me because you care about my feelings. When you're at the job and your boss, a white person, you smile at him even though you're not happy with him and how he treats you. So when you get home, you should lie to me, smile at me, because it feels like because I love you, I get the worst of you. And I like to address that concept, but not in this episode. I went back and Googled and YouTube the entire conversation. And I literally got maybe like 5 to 10 minutes in, and I came across something else that I felt was like super profound that I figured I would talk about first. So this is a quote or an excerpt of the conversation, or the dialogue between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. So she asked him about an essay that he wrote called Everybody's Protest novel. And basically, she's a writer, he's a writer, and she was asking him how he felt about the writing of that essay, how does he stand, or how does he feel about what he wrote in that then comparative to right now, and then in relationship to his generation and her generation of authors or black people in general. And he starts to talk about it and talks about the perspective with which he was writing that novel from. And he basically is self-reflecting and just saying that he was trying to not necessarily create, but formulate an actual formal philosophy or theology for himself based off of everything that he had discovered about himself, how he felt about life, the universe, his place in it, black people, all of that. But the actual quote is, and this is James Baldwin responding to Nikki Giovanni. He says, in Everybody's Protest novel, I was trying for myself, after all, first of all, to elucidate for myself a theology and the effects of a theology, which I then only realized I carried in myself. He also said, it's not the world that was my oppressor, because what the world does to you, if the world does it to you long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do to yourself. You become a collaborator, an accomplice of your own murderers, because you believe the same things they do. They think it's important to be white, and you think it's important to be white. They think it's a shame to be black, and you think it's a shame to be black. And you have no corroboration around you of any other sense of life. All the corroboration around you is in terms of the white majority standards. So deplorable, they frighten you to death. You don't eat watermelon. You get so rigid you can't dance. You can hardly move by the time you're 14. You're always scrubbed and shining. A parody of God knows what, because no white person has ever been as clean as you have been forced to become. And then he goes on to say, and you have somehow to begin to break out of all of that and try to become yourself. It's hard for anybody, but it's very hard if you're born black in a white society. Hard because you've got to divorce yourself from the standards of that society. End quote. So that shit right there hit me hard. Only because my experience growing up with my relationship with my own racial identity. I'm the son and the product of two proud black parents. So it's not that I'm a brown-skinned young man. It's not that I am mistaken for being anything other than black. But my experience was unique because within the black community, it's not just your appearance that you can be discriminated against within the community. It's also your interests. It's also your intelligence level. It's also how you choose to express yourself. And what the cultural ramifications and qualifications that have been put in place to identify someone as black or not black. So this idea of also within having to fit in and have an identity and feel that you belong within our own subgroup, our own culture of African Americans in the United States. Then on top of that, you're looking to be accepted and acceptable within a white society or a perceived white supremacist nation like the United States. So it was confusing, to say the least, for me, because I'm observant, I'm intelligent, I know who I am, but I also am in the world. I'm hearing my peers. I'm seeing who actually is in the social group that I am, who have the same interests that I do, how I'm being judged and joked about in certain scenarios with regard to, specifically within my culture, how, as a young black kid, a young black man, a young black boy, when you're doing something and, oh, you like math, why you acting white? You talk proper, why you acting white? You're skateboarding, why you acting white? Yeah, back in the day, doing skating was not something that young black kids did. It was not a regular thing. It was seen as a white person's community, as a white person's activity. You know what I'm saying? At least where I was at in California, and this is, not necessarily when skateboarding first came out, but when it became popular And you had the skate icons, Tony Hawk, Alva, all of that whole group when they were coming out, and the normal person could go and buy a board, and when it became more mainstream, it wasn't taboo, but it just wasn't the normal thing. So the people around me, if they saw you doing something that wasn't what they quote unquote believed was black, they'll let you know about it. And then, I'm cool amongst my peer groups, but when I go outside of those and I'm doing things where there's normally not a black person around, my peers, if they're white or not black, they don't have any issues because I'm just me. They know me. But if I go into a larger group that's outside of me and outside of my familiarity, some of those people may be looking like, I walk up and they're like, why are you at the science fair? Like, why aren't you doing this? And you don't look like you should be here, right? That's the look that you get. And it can be a little disconcerting, but it is what it is. But again, back to the quote. So I just basically wanted to give some background on how I related to what was being said, or how it affected me and why it affected me that way. But in particular, the part that was super powerful is when Mr. Baldwin said, quote, it's not the world that was my oppressor, because what the world does to you, if the world does it to you long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do to yourself. You become a collaborator and accomplice of your own murderers because you believe the same things they do. That is a tragic realization that I think as black people we have not come to grips with. And I say it that way because I think in more common ways it's recognized. Like, it's easy for someone, a black person, to say to another black person, you voting for Trump is like you hating, is like a form of self-hate. Having a lot of media, social media presence and media personnel have characterized Candace Owens as, a prime example of a black person hating being black with the things that she's saying. Feeling like she has to fit in with white people. I don't agree, but I'm just saying, using that as an example of the types of commentary that are outside that are easier for us as a community to try to accept or adopt or agree are using his words that we collaborate with. That person's a collaborator because white people say that black people are crazy, and she's saying that black people are crazy, and in turn saying that she's crazy. Again, I don't believe that, but I'm just using this as an example. But I think what doesn't get talked about is our social practices. The things that people that are quote unquote black, what they actually embrace and adopt, without even understanding and knowing that that's not who we are. And again, later on in the quote, when he says, you become a collaborator, an accomplice of your own murderers, because you believe the same things they do. They think it's important to be white, and you think it's important to be white. They think it's a shame to be black, and you think it's a shame to be black. And you have no corroboration around you of any other sense of life. All the corroboration around you is in terms of the white majority standards. So deplorable, they frighten you to death. You don't eat watermelon. You get so rigid you can't dance, and you can hardly move by the time you're 14. You're always scrubbed and shining, a parody of God knows what, because no white person has ever been as clean as you have been forced to become. So he's talking about basically not having any sense of culture. You're immersed. We were immersed due to the conditions with which we were brought into this country. We were immersed within a white supremacist environment. So even if we want to shed that, we don't know what we are supposed to be. We don't know what we're supposed to look like. We don't have examples of black excellence outside of people who have escaped white supremacy. I don't know any statistics. I don't know how many black people use 23andMe and how many of us are really trying to figure out where we're from. But the one thing that I feel, and I've spoken on before, that we're missing, that is very much connected to our own self-oppression, is our lack of a legacy. And what people are not paying attention to is that a lot of the tactics that are being employed to keep us subjugated are attacks on our legacy, attacks on the ability for us to create something to pass down and follow, the removal of wisdom amongst us. So we're dependent on the wisdom and the thought processes of our oppressors. So when it says they think it's important to be white, you think it's important to be white, not because you believe it, but because you don't know anything else. And you have co-opted the value system and the way that the community works of a white supremacist regime without even realizing it. I've said this before. Look at our model and examples of success and affluence. What do we consider like the markers for being independent and classy and worthy of a certain level of stature in the community? They're all European valued commodities, whether it's the designer clothes that are being worn, the vehicles that are being driven, just everything that we're doing is the mark of European affluence. Not saying that there's no technology in where we come from in Africa, and that, you know, nobody dressed nice in Africa, but these designers don't design clothes in a way that says, hey, I was thinking about black people when I created this line. Our bodies are not shaped the same. They're not made the same. They don't, it's, again, we're not the same. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not better or worse. It's just not who we are. And we don't know, because we were stolen, and that part of our culture and our history and what we should be able to relate to is missing. Where are our cultural clues outside of slavery, emancipation, Jim Crow, and wherever or whatever we're in right now? What are our social cues? What are we trying to adopt and mimic and morph and move forward as a something to hold on to and guide us in the present and help create a legacy for the people who are coming after us, our children, so they can be proud and Black and not feel disjointed or disconnected from their identity. When he speaks about, you don't eat watermelon, you get so rigid that you can't dance, it's like, I don't want to remind anyone any more than my appearance of my skin tone that I'm Black. I don't want to do anything that is going to put someone in the mind state and remind them of who I actually am. And he says, you're always scrubbed and shining, a parody of God knows what, because no white person has ever been as clean as you've been forced to become. And it's like, you don't even know what you're copying and what type of persona that you're parodying, because nobody that you're copying has ever had to transform themselves, has had to be so righteous and so clean and so, perfect. Like, you don't, there's nothing comparable to what we've had to endure and transform ourselves just to survive. Just to not be in like actual physical danger. Let's not even talk about emotional and mental, like actual physical danger. You're trying to remove everything that will remind a white person of power and influence, that they're not talking to a Black person. As far as cultural clues, and all ethnicities have them. So it's not like a hang up. It's not something that, people have stereotypes and things of that nature, but in general and specifically being a part of a certain community, those likes and dislikes, the cultural things that you engage in are observed, and then also, after observation, are used as social clues when people are evaluating their surroundings. And then he speaks about, he goes on to say, and then once you realize that that's the predicament that you're in, quote, you have to somehow begin to break out of all of that and try to become yourself. It's hard for anybody, but it's very hard if you're born Black in a white society. Hard because you've got to divorce yourself from the standards of that society. Again, we're immersed in a European white supremacist cultural phenomena. And in the midst of trying to figure out what and how we're supposed to operate and survive within this system, we're also trying to live literally in the system freely, to somehow take advantage of the opportunities that we're told we have to thrive in this country, not just survive. Trying to figure out what it actually means to be black in this country, shamelessly. And still maintain a level of dignity and pride while still being allowed these opportunities to excel in this nation, to pursue happiness. Because a lot of the power structure doesn't want to see a quote unquote black person in the sense that we would need to be to have some sort of liberation. They don't want that in the workplace. It's not acceptable within society. So it's not even just the people that are in power. It's the people that do business with the people that are in power. It's the consumers that buy products from the people that are in power. It's a general negative connotation to being black. It's, divorcing yourself from the standards of that society. Well, the standard of this society is that somehow we are less than because we're black. And that everything that relates to us that isn't us parodying our white counterparts is dangerous, is not professional, is sloppy, is not clean. Like, those are the things that we're actually dealing with. And it's tragic. But, this conversation is coming in the 50s or the 60s, maybe. So for him to say something that profound and to lay it out and for it to still be relevant today is amazing, but it's also heartbreaking. It's, like I said, I'm only 5 minutes in. This conversation seems very profound. I think that there's going to be a lot more for me to talk about within this conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, these are just my thoughts relating to my own life. I'm sure everybody has their own unique human experience, but I think a lot of people who look like me, can hear these words and understand a little bit more, have empathy for each other, and actually understand what's going on and what we're dealing with as a people, so we can actually try to combat the source of what's happening. Yeah, man, that's crazy. I have to say that again because it's so powerful. It's like, quote, "It's not the world that was my oppressor, because what the world does to you, the world does it to you long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do to yourself." Understand when he's saying yourself, He's talking about yourself, literally, like you as a person feeling a certain way about yourself, oppressing yourself. But then those who look like you, like we are as a family, we're all descendants of slaves to a certain degree. We are oppressing ourselves with the standards and stereotypes that we've adopted because of how white supremacy was introduced and that we became a product of. And I think, we can topple white supremacy, right? But the next thing that comes, it's important for us to understand and actually have an idea of what it is it means to be black. Not what it means to be black in America, but what it means to be black. Because when you destroy a system, you have to be able to create and put another system in place. And if you have people who are still thinking and their point of view is still stained and aligned with the general principles of white supremacy and white supremacist, patriarchy or whatever it is that you want. Like, if you don't know anything else but that, it's hard for you to create a system that's opposite of that, if that makes any sense. You're going to come across like you support and have the same agenda that your oppressor did because you don't know anything different. And that's the dilemma. That's what we need to look at. I hear, I see interviews, people, and we're just crashing out on each other. There's no empathy. There's no thought process. And I'm hearing irony and hypocrisy by these people who are like basically laying into their brothers and sisters, like calling out their flaws, like they don't have anything that they do that's aligned with white supremacy. Even the conversation that you're having outside, making another black person look crazy. It's I don't know. I just know it's something that needs to be completed. It needs to be done. It needs to be addressed. All of that. Like I said, this is just the first of, I feel, what may be a few conversations about this dialogue between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. It's on YouTube. The transcript is online, so you can look it up and check it out. And like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button. This is the podcast, The Truth Lies Here. And I'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks.